I've been trying to decorate the space behind me so it isn't as bare as it usually is. So I've got my trusty Sigma lens and Canon body camera behind. I've got my binoculars, got a nice little wooden duck figurine that I got from an antique centre, and then just a few of the many wildlife related books that I have in my office space. But anyway, hello and welcome to this potentially last video of 2023. As the title suggests, it is all about my top 12 favourite images that I've taken this year. I've been very fortunate to have some amazing wildlife experiences this year all over the UK. To note a few, going up to the Isle of Mull and having a surprise encounter with basking sharks, really large groups of common dolphins, bow riding, which was absolutely incredible, and then a bit closer to home going to find the nightjars on the Norfolk coast, and also going to see some of the older seal pups on the beach. There's so many more wildlife encounters that I've had the privilege of witnessing this year. It feels as though each year just gets better and better, which I'm really excited about, not just for what I'm able to find, but also what I'm able to photograph and to continue improving my style over time. So I think we're gonna get right into it. The plan is that I will talk a bit briefly about the image that I took and include some footage, if I have any, of that encounter as well. So going back to right at the very start of this year, during the first couple of weeks of January, I visited a new location, which was Fen Drayton Nature Reserve. I hadn't been there before. I didn't have a very good idea of what the layout was like until I got there. But I really enjoyed it. It was a really bright wintry day and I was coming back, finishing off the walk. I heard the tinkling, tweeting calls of a long-tailed tit flock, and I just had a really nice few minutes spent with them as they were flitting through the branches. And one of the pictures that I managed to take, which I'm really happy with, was one that landed on the edge of a tree branch, and for a split second it looked in my direction, sort of had its head tilted in a curious pose, and yes, like I said, I managed to get a really nice shot of that. It was a bit dreary in terms of the background colours, but it's made it quite muted because long-tailed tits aren't a very colourful bird anyway, so the muted colours sort of blended in quite nicely with the bird itself. So yeah, and that was one of the first pictures I took of the year that I'm very happy to share. February I went to the Norfolk coast to look for the grey seal colony. We are very fortunate to have, I believe, about 60% of the grey seal population just on British shores. If that's wrong, I will leave a quote down here to be sure, but I went there just after the pupping season, so a lot of the pups were left independent from their mothers. They didn't need their mother's milk anymore, and it was not long after I arrived that there was one seal pup down near the water's edge. It was in its banana pose, so that meant that it was very comfortable and it wasn't disturbed by me being there. Nevertheless, I just stayed up on the bank out of its way. I laid down on the ground to get eye level with the pup. Yeah, just as the sun was rising, spending these few precious moments with this young seal pup. It was really nice, and again, come away with an image where there was a really strong connection with the seal looking into the camera. So this next one also happened in February. I wasn't able to get a video shot of it because it was very unexpected, but I was out along the farmers' fields and along the riverbank just seeing what was out there. It was coming out to about sunset time, and there was one moment where I pulled the car over, went to get my camera and my tripod out of the boot because there was some small bird species flitting around, and then out the corner of my eye this white streak came across me, and it was this barn owl, and it did a full loop around me, came round the front and then carried on up the ditch line that was along the next to the road, and so very quickly I got my camera up, I tracked it, I took so many shots as it flew past, and I wasn't even 100% sure that my settings were right because I'd only just got my camera out of the bag. So I was a bit worried about low light and the speed that the barn owl was reaching, whether there would be blur within the images. But I look back on it on the back of the camera and I was thrilled with what I got. Just a split moment where, again, the barn owl is looking at me as it's flying past. And yeah, it was just a wonderful moment to have, and it emphasises the quote of expect the unexpected, especially when it comes to wildlife photography. So for the past year or so, I've been keeping an eye on the local hare population. I have a field right outside my back garden, and while I was recording them around March time, the grass on the farmers' fields were coming through, so there was nice vibrancy to the images. Yeah, and there was these moments where the hares could run up very close to where I was positioned in this sort of thicket bush. So I picked one of the pictures where it's in the grass, and yeah, like I said, to have it right on my doorstep is wonderful. And then a bit later on in the year, about July time, I had another encounter with a hare, a bit further away from home, but the environment it was in wasn't the exact same as the farmer's field outside my house. It was part of like a wildflower meadow that was part of a reed bed. This was at a nature reserve not too far away. And yeah, this hare just came running along the edge of the water on the reed bed, and then it stopped briefly in this patch of wildflowers, and it was a really nice scene to capture. Again, I wasn't able to get a video of that, but yeah, just to see the differences between an all green sort of carpet and then having a variety of colours and tones from the wildflowers. It's a nice comparison between them. And again, they're a lovely mammal to photograph. They just look so wise, and yeah, very, very lucky to again see these hares quite close up. So as most of you will know, I make annual trips to the Isle of Mull. This year I did 2 trips. The first one was back in May of this year, where I wanted to return to the Treshnish Isles to go back and revisit the puffin colony that would be starting their breeding season on these uninhabited islands. I had a relatively clear vision of the images I wanted to take before I even got to Mull. I said, right, I definitely want to get this kind of portrait shot, I want to get an in-flight shot, and also some kind of social interaction. So we got to the island, the weather was perfect to begin with. The sun was out, it was lighting up the whole cliff face and the puffins as well, and then about towards the last hour that we were spending there, the rain came in, the wind picked up, so the conditions were not as good as they were from the start. But it was where I was able to get the majority of the images that I really wanted to take. It was hard to choose between the hundreds of images that I took. One of them is of a puffin standing, he's sort of facing into the wind and the rain, and I noticed that his bill, like the height of it, was slightly bigger than the others, and he just seemed to have this air of, you know, whether he was of old age or that he just seemed different. I can't quite put my finger on it, but just seeing this bill being comparatively larger than the other puffins around it, I really wanted to get a portrait of this very regal looking puffin, and like I said, managed to capture that where it was standing sort of side onto me and it was facing against the wind and the rain. And yeah, I just really liked the focus between the foreground and the background, really nice and smooth, and just to keep the puffin in pure focus. And then the second one, again, it sort of came around when the weather turned, and this was when the puffins that were coming off the sea to land were battling with like an updraft against the cliff face. And this gave me ample opportunity to get these in-flight shots, because they were sort of hovering for a while before the wind died down, and then they would go and land. I had lots of opportunities for that. There was quite a lot of puffins coming in at one time, and then there was one puffin in particular that he was hanging up in the air for quite some time, and again the wind was coming in, the rain was coming down, but it provided a really nice environmental shot with the rain droplets in the frame, and being able to freeze the puffin in flight. So I returned to the Isle of Mull again in August, and for this I wanted to go out more on the boats. There was a lot more activity in terms of the marine life. As I said near the start, there was some really nice encounters with common dolphins, there were minke whales feeding not too far, and then we came across, I think there was at least 2 basking sharks at one point, which I wasn't expecting. It was my first time seeing them ever, and it was amazing just to see them. As like the size of them, you can't comprehend until you see them. And then there was one point where we were coming back from our boat trip, and I looked up to the cliff faces as we were coming into port, and right on the edge of the cliff was this white-tailed eagle. And other times before, I've had really nice opportunities to photograph them in flight, coming in right next to the boat to pick up the fish that the skipper would throw out. But this one, it was very much an environmental shot. It was on the edge of the cliff, the sea mist was just rolling in the background, and this white-tailed eagle was just standing proudly on the edge. So I took a quick shot, quite a few shots, because the boat was obviously moving away. Again, another really nice environmental shot that I've come to love quite a bit over time. And yeah, a magnificent bird in a magnificent setting, and one of my favourites taken on the Isle of Mull this year. So going back to the month of July, I spent pretty much the whole day near the Norfolk coast. The main subject that I wanted to find was the nightjars, because there's a really healthy breeding population that come over to the UK around this time, and this location in particular was a good place to hear them, but then also an opportunity to see them. Now, while I didn't get an opportunity to photograph them, I was really pleased to get a very short video of one in flight. I hadn't been able to see them properly before. I would love to go back again to see if I could find them roosting in the daytime. They're an enchanting bird. I absolutely love them. Everything about the way they look, to the calls that they make. But while I was there during the daytime, before I went to look for the nightjars, I had a moment where there was these small group of wild rabbits, and they were in this open clearing, and as I was coming up to the clearing, they all scarpered. I thought, okay, I think I'm going to wait this out. So there happened to be a piece of log that was lying on the ground, thick enough for me to hide behind, and for also me to have my camera sitting on it and getting as eye level to the ground and to the rabbits as I could. So I lay down behind this log. I must have waited for about another 30 to 40 minutes before the rabbits came back out again. And it was a really wonderful moment. There must have been about 4 or 5 rabbits that all came out, and it was just a lovely setting, because I've seen wild rabbits, but I surprisingly don't think I've ever photographed them, despite how commonplace they are. Yeah, it was a really lovely encounter just to lay there, to absolutely still, to watch these rabbits come out and feed, a bit of socialising. And then following that, the pair of muntjac deer came out of the forest as well. Again, completely taken off guard. I did not expect them to turn up, let alone the rabbits. And while I didn't get pictures of the muntjacs, I was able to get a piece of footage of the male muntjac sort of running in my direction, twigging that I was there, and then ended up alerting everything else, and that was the time that I would have then left. So as much as there are days filled with different encounters and all sorts of species coming across, there are also the days where there's just nothing. And you can often feel deterred by that, especially when you have a subject in mind or species in mind and it just doesn't show up at all. So I had I've had more than one of those days, but one day in particular that I created a video about, which was to do with kind of the idea of dealing with patience and to, you know, keep going out and doing this even though it's not always going to be, oh, I see a wonderful bird every single day kind of thing. You know, there are going to be days where there's just nothing that catches your eye, or the images that you take just don't seem right. There are those days, and what I've sort of come to realise is getting over that is just carry on doing it. You know, don't be deterred by just 2 or 3 days where you get nothing. There are going to be other days, there's going to be other opportunities, and there's always going to be the chance to be surprised. And it was very poignant on this day. I went there to potentially look for kingfishers at this reserve. I did end up seeing bearded tits for the first time, very, very distant. And that was a fleeting glance, so they didn't stay for more than 2 minutes. And like I said, they were quite a distance away. But there was one moment must have been in the hide for about 2 hours, nothing showed up until this grey heron did. And I just took pictures of this grey heron. You know, they are a very prehistoric looking bird and they're interesting in their own way. You know, they're large in size. There was one moment where it came across an area which had like purple flower stems in the middle. Not sure what they're called. The pictures that I managed to take, it was, you know, it had these vibrant colours in the foreground with this grey heron looking for food in the middle, in between. So it wasn't an amazing encounter, but it was just really nice to sort of take a step back and think, you know, you don't have to be taking all singing, all dancing species that not a lot of people encounter. It can be the most common species that you can come away with an image to be really, really proud of. You know, just to appreciate the things that you see on a daily basis over what's rarer and what is less seen. Yeah, it definitely made me more aware of, you know, appreciating what is already around you. And this grey heron was an example of that. And then to round off this year, my last 2 images were taken when I went to the Yorkshire Dales at the end of October. I didn't actually know that there was a red squirrel population in this area in particular until like the week before we travelled. So I was really excited at the prospect of going to potentially find these red squirrels. And the whole time we were there, it rained. It was very much like today, very gloomy, very wet. And then as we made our way through to the viewing area, ended up seeing about 5 or 6 red squirrels all feeding. They were running around, and there was one moment where a red squirrel landed, or he climbed up the lens of my camera. Again, something I really wasn't expecting. Again, I had these images in mind that I wanted to take, and I was able to get the majority of them and be really happy with them as well. Again, a lot of pictures that I took, but my 2 phone favourites from this time include one of them where there's a red squirrel and he's running across this tree branch that was sort of placed up against 2 standing trees. And yeah, I really wanted to get a running shot, and this one squirrel was coming back and forth the whole time, so whenever there was an opportunity where it was running and facing me, that was where I took the shot. And it was really nice to get some of the background autumn colours. And then the second one is where there is one positioned again on this tree trunk, but he's just sitting, and I believe it's eating a bit of food from the feeding platform. And again, the autumn colours in the background are just really nice. So I hope that you enjoyed this sit down video. I put out a request for questions if anyone had them. So I'm just going to read a couple of them now. So one of the questions that I received from this poll was, what are your favourite places to take photos? I really enjoy going to the woodlands to photograph. There's a huge abundance of life within it, not just in terms of birds and mammals, but there's also your fungi, you know, all these different tree species that grow around. Seeing moss growing up on the tree trunks, it's just a really nice environment, and you can go there even if it's really bright sunshine because you're in the shade, or even when it's raining. There's just this ambience that comes from being in the woodlands, no matter what weather conditions you come across. So yeah, I would definitely say favourite place to photograph would be in a woodland. And then the one other question, if you could photograph any wildlife anywhere in the world, what would it be? Quite a tricky question because there's, you know, quite a number of locations that I would like to visit, whether it be in the next 5 years or the next 10 years. But I think one that comes to mind, I would really like to have an opportunity to travel to the region of Canada and around Vancouver Island. You know, there's a wealth of wildlife out there, and there isn't just one specific species that I go and look for. You know, I'd love to see moose, if there was an opportunity to see the bears there. You've got humpback whales that come off there, orcas that are in that sort of region, and also to see the bird life. There's quite a few Canadian and American bird species that would be really nice to see in the wild. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Feel free to give it a like down below. If you're not subscribed and you enjoy the content that I make, then consider subscribing. I think this video is a little bit overrun, so I was going to go into my plans for 2024, but I'm actually going to put that as a blog post instead, so you can read through my plans for next year, and that is on my Medium blog posts, which you will find in the link down below and also on my website as well. So with that, I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, or whatever you celebrate at this time of year, and I hope that everyone has a lovely start to the new year. If you have any of your own photography projects for next year, I'd love to hear about it. Certainly leave a comment down below, and I wish you all the best with your own personal goals or your own projects that you have for the new year.